Moving on to agenda item 1, apologies for absence. Apologies have been received from Councillor Joe McPherson, Councillor Ian Foster, Councillor Christine Mason, Councillor Gary Myers, Councillor James Newport, Councillor Phil Shaw and Councillor Mike Wilkinson. Agenda item 2, substitute members. Councillor Julie Gooding is substituting for Councillor Gary Myers. Councillor Merrick is substituting for Councillor Foster and Councillor Mrs Butcher is substituting for Councillor Phil Shaw. Agenda item 3, non-members attending. We have in attendance Councillor Julie Gooding, Councillor Cheryl Rowe, Councillor Arthur Williams and Councillor Daniel Efte. Welcome to you all. Oh right, sorry, correction, yes, no, Councillor Julie Gooding is actually a member, so the non-members attending then are Councillor Cheryl Rowe, Councillor Arthur Williams and Councillor Daniel Efte.
And Councillor Sperry.
Oh, and sorry, and Councillor Sperring, yes. Agenda item 4, minutes of the meeting held on the 1st of March 2022. Are the minutes agreed, members? Okay, thank you, those are agreed. Agenda item 5, to receive declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest, members? Okay, there are none. Thank you. So we move now on to agenda item 6, which is the approval of the Review Committee's annual report. I will ask the Council's Principal Democratic and Corporate Services Officer, Sonia Worthington, to introduce the report. Sonia.
Thank you, Chairman. The annual report before you this evening covers the work of the committee from the period of June 2021 to the end of March 2022. It includes a forward from the Chairman as well as listing all members of the committee during the period covered. The report gives a more detailed overview of the committee's work during the past year and sets out the dates when the committee had actively discussed those areas of the Council's work streams. Before the report is submitted in July to Council, links will be inserted into the document to the corresponding minutes of Review Committee meetings where those discussions took place. It will make it a bit more of a joined-up document for people reading through it. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the Council's Democratic Services Officer, Veronica Schuschka, for all her hard work on the report. I welcome members' comments, Chairman, and ask that the draft annual report be approved for receipt by Council at the next full Council meeting.
Thank you, Sonia. Members, are there any questions on the report? Councillor Drake.
Sorry about that, Chairman. Chairman, I must say that the report, I believe, reads well, but a couple of points, if I may. Members may recall that some months ago we had an external review of the Review Committee and the functions of the Review Committee, and it was agreed then to change its name to the Review and Scrutiny Committee. And I was wondering if that should be reflected in this report. Another point, if I may, Mr. Chairman, on the contents page, item 6, on page 9, it says RIPA. I think that should show its full name, and the acronym should be perhaps shown in brackets. Okay, and they are my only comments. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Drake. Yeah, the point about changing the name, I did discuss this with the leader and with the chief executive, and what they agreed was that we would change the name in the next municipal year. So you are right. It's just it's not this municipal year. It will be changed to, well, if subject to council scrutiny approval, the Oversight and Scrutiny Committee. Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Obviously, the role of the and Scrutiny Committee should in future concentrate more on scrutiny as well as review.
Yeah, thank you. And I think you're right. In the report, which reviewed the review committee, I think the name review everyone accepts it's looking backwards, and we shouldn't be doing that. We should be looking forward. So thank you for that. And the point about the RIPA is noted, and that will be in the final report. Sorry, yeah.
In terms of the name change as well, what the intention will be to include that recommendation within the report going into annual council at the beginning of the next municipal year as part of the constitution of committees for 22-23.
Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Mrs Shaw.
I've just got, have you turned it off? On page 7.8, fifth one down, it says work in partnership with other councils and it's ongoing. Regular attendance, ECC organised district and borough climate forum, meeting with ECC to explore opportunities.
I think you jumped to the next
I've jumped
item. Sorry. You're wishing our lives away. Sorry. Councillor Constable.
Yeah, on the RIPA, if you look at the item 6, it says RIPA and then it says underneath it what it stands for. That's already been done on my report.
Yeah. I think what if I'm understanding you correctly, Councillor Drake, you want that in the contents as well? Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Thank you. Any further comments, members? Okay, members, I would like to move a motion that the draft annual report be approved subject to the RIPA amendment for submission to council. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Mrs Shaw, thank you. Can those members in favour please show your hands? Okay, thank you, members. That's unanimous. Moving now on to item 7, which is report on carbon neutral by 2030. I'd like to welcome Councillor David Sperring, portfolio holder for Environment and Place, and Marcus Hoppen, the Assistant Director for Place and Environment, who've joined us for this item. Marcus, could I ask you to introduce the report, please?
Good evening, members. Thank you. So the report is a fairly short report, and sort of, I guess it says what it does on the packet, really, that it's just a summary of the annual progress of the action plan. Probably the easiest way to explain it is to go through the recommendations on 7.4 and then to explain the logic of how it's been set out. So that, obviously the report initially goes through the progress against the carbon neutral action plan, which you'll find is outlined in paragraph 3.2, and really sums up that, if I'm being brutally honest, I guess that we've not made as much progress as I would have liked, but there are reasons for doing so. I think we've highlighted those in terms of the fact that COVID has had an impact in terms of resource that could be allocated to this. So it's had some effect. So you'll see there's about 9 actions there that are amber that ideally should ought to be green. But they will progress and begin to move forward again. In terms of looking forward, and I said I think it had been quite a brief report. It was almost just on what progress we've made for the year. A great deal of the report is actually about looking forward. So we found that the Carbon Neutral Working Group was possibly looking at a wider terms of reference than perhaps was originally envisaged. So in many ways, the terms of reference were very narrow, and the action plan itself is quite narrow. So at times we found that we were often drifting into aspects of carbon neutrality that were beyond the scope of the original projects. And so we feel that the terms of reference to the Carbon Neutral Working Group ought to be widened to reflect that moving forward. And that sort of dovetails very much went into Appendix 3, which is a sustainability strategy, and which reflects, again, that wider view, district-wide view of addressing carbon neutral aims, rather than perhaps just that very narrow view that we had initially of just addressing carbon neutrality within the council. And so that sort of covers points 4 and 5 of the recommendation. In terms of recommendation 3, again, there is some good news. It's again looking forward in that we have been using Brentwood's Climate and Sustainability Officer to assist with developing the sustainability strategy. And again, we seek to formalise that. So it's been a trial basis. It's worked very well. And so what we're suggesting is that we actually progress that, going back to the executive with a service level agreement to say that we'd like to have approximately about half of that time of that officer to assist here as well as at Brentwood, because they're quite similar ambitions. Wherever you go across any district or borough, you know that the issues of carbon neutrality are almost the same. So there's some sort of economies there that can be sort of gained by us joining together on that, and that essentially covers the report. So I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, are there any questions? Councillor Mrs Shaw.
Thank you, Chairman. Now I'm on the right report. I do apologise. On 7.8, it's the fifth item down. It says about regular attendance for ECC organised district and borough climate. It's ongoing. Are you actually managing to get any meetings with ECC, etc., and are they frequent?
Yes, through the chair. Yes, it's they're quarterly, and so there has been 4. I think the most recent one was 22nd of March. So I think it's I can send you the details. I can't remember the councillor's name precisely, but I could send you over the details of those if you wish to a bit more information on those.
Yes, please, because we don't see anything on Essex on them at all.
Well, I'll gladly forward. I mean, I think they're public minutes, so I will check, but I'll gladly forward them on to you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Dray.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Excuse my ignorance, but I wonder if someone give me a clue as to how a carbon footprint is actually calculated, because I don't know. A couple of other points, if I may. On page 7.4, paragraphs 8.1 and 8.2, it talks about a resource of £20,000 has been requested. Has that £20,000 already been agreed? Is the question, because I know it's not in the recommendations. Okay, and also in respect of the £20,000, I'd like a little bit more expansion as to exactly how that would be used, if that can be done. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So can you recall that I didn't note the first question. I've noted the second two. So the first question was around the carbon footprint. So yes. So in terms of calculating the carbon footprint, there is a kind of a set methodology. I won't pretend that I fully understand how it's, but it's mainly on converting units of energy. So whether that's gas, electricity, or even oil, and water has some carbon footprint to that. So it's expressed almost in the amount of carbon that's used in terms of either of those utility consumptions, and it's multiplied up to give you that figure. So, for example, so we'd go through basically every electric, every utility bill, every fuel bill that we have for the council for the year, and then you'd multiply that against this carbon factor, and it gives you an overall tonnage of carbon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I think.
Yeah, Councillor Dray, if I might answer the second part of your question. Ideally, this report should have come to review and scrutiny prior to the executive, but the leader was quite insistent that we maintain the momentum that we've started on this carbon neutral move, and if we hadn't have done it in the order that it went to executive last week, we would have come here this week and we wouldn't have been able to have executive till either the end of May or June. The executive did agree the £20,000, which was not part of the mid-term financial strategy, and they were also made aware that as we go further down the road, there will be the need for further physical and financial support to keep the momentum going, which they took on board at the time, but wasn't for a conversation last week.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor James Gooding.
Yeah, good evening. Page 7.6, item 6. Considering the purchase of electric vehicles, it says ongoing. Have you got any idea of timeline for this? That's the first question. And the second bit is really, is there any plans, any thoughts, the infrastructure for charging these vehicles?
Thank you. The answer is, I'll answer the second question first. The answer is yes, because the infrastructure is in some ways where the delay has been in terms of purchasing vehicles. So I didn't want to purchase vehicles and discover that we didn't actually have the infrastructure to charge and rapid charge. There's an assumption that triple charge is fine, but the best will in the world, no reflection on my staff, someone's going to forget to charge them overnight at some point, and then all of a sudden you've got a flat vehicle. So you need to get a rapid charge, so that there's a piece of work that ensured that we had the power available and where we were going to charge. So it just took a little bit longer. So so the answer is yes. We're going to be putting charging facilities down at the depot, which is not accessible to the public, but we also anticipate to be putting a charging station up at Hockley Woods, which will be available to use by the public, but of course will have a priority for us to charge our vehicles. But it was just ensuring that we had enough kilowatts going through the ground, as it were, to actually do so. We are in our second round of procurement. So we initially procured a van as a trial electric van. The company could not provide us what we requested at the end of the procurement, so they said they couldn't, and we've had to re-go out. So we're just putting that procurement back together. I would anticipate that we still probably won't now get a vehicle till possibly 14 months' time. But it's not one now, it's 3 vehicles, so we are expanding. But the delay has been around ensuring that there's the infrastructure, and secondly, that there are the vehicles available. I mean, again, we use 4x4s, pickup trucks, and there just aren't the suitable vehicles at this stage. So we did a good sift. You can see it's been frustrating for me this as well, because I'd like to progress this further, but we have to sort of go through quite a few sort of checks before we got as far as we have.
Right, okay, thank you.
Councillor Mrs Gadsden.
Chair, can I just check with you? I've not been involved with carbon neutral working group at all. What I'm interested in finding out is on page 7.1, 3.4, paragraph 3.4, it does say the production of a new local plan and outcomes are closely reliant on the progress of these projects. What I'm wondering is the council's policy on development on houses is the materials used, green policies, if you like, solar energy, water efficient systems, etc. Whether there's any sort of liaison between the carbon group and the planning so that they can affect what we actually build. Does that make sense?
Perfectly, yes, thank you. So the short answer is yes, there will be. Obviously, we're in the process of reviewing the local plan now, and so I would anticipate over the next year you'll start to see a draft of many of the policies of the local plan come forward. So as they come forward, the member working group probably have its work cut out, that they will be asked to look at those and review those and feed back into the local plan process. So, you know, that they will have a direct influence on some of those policies, particularly around building standards, which is where a lot of the sort of the materials are. But yes, it's a good opportunity that we can't miss. So it's going to be quite a busy time, I suspect, over the next year. Thank you.
Yes. Councillor Sperry.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I just add that most of these developers are fully aware of what's coming and are on the ball already and are putting forward their own ideas or geared up to have to deal with what we will be asking of them. So, well, obviously, as Marcus has said, we're going to have to make sure we've got all our paperwork in line. I don't think there'll be any surprises for them in what they're going to have to address.
Chair, can I
Yep.
just through and Councillor Sperrin, will these apply to small developments, people, one-off houses, small blocks of flats? I mean, we understand that large developers, it's a lot easier for them to adhere to our policies because of the financial backing they have. But is this going to be across the board policy that insists on a certain level of
I really don't know.
I don't think we're in a position to say at this stage. I mean, you know, certainly, I think it'd be certainly we're encouraged the working group and this authority to be ambitious in its targets. But then what you've got to do is then look at what's has been achieved elsewhere. So you know, officers will. I said, so from a carbon neutral aspect, I will probably say, well, I want to be as ambitious as possible, but then we're asked to have a steer from the planning policy officers to say, well, actually, look, you know, this is what's likely to be approved by an inspector, so there's got to be tempered with what we really can expect to do, but it's too early to really comment on that at the moment. Thank you.
Sorry, Marcus, so are you saying that the government's policies have, they are on the green agenda, will directly filter down and affect what we can insist on?
Yes, yes. So local policy is always based on national policy. So yes, but the national policy, as Councillor Sperring has alluded to, that the developers are well aware that there is a change coming, if you like, and so I don't think it'd be a surprise. It's just the application of that. And so you know, I think some of you are familiar with BREEAM. I think probably from our own asset development programme. So BREEAM is an accepted standard that is an easy language to integrate. But if we said we wanted, let's say, carbon neutral for every building across, you know, that's a standard beyond what is recognised or easy to measure. So you've got to have something that's tangible and understandable across sort of, if you like, a national framework.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions, members? I've got some questions. I'm putting these on behalf of absent members. Do you want me to go through them one at a time, Marcus?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Okay. The first one is on page 7.6 of Appendix 1, and the first bullet point on the update says that meter readings are scheduled and are incorporated into the annual visit. And this was interrupted due to COVID-19. Have you got an idea when those will be updated?
Yes. So most of the meter readings are now in, if you like. We do have most of the meter readings. Where we struggle, of course, is some of the approximations. A lot of the electric and gas is easy to get fairly accurate readings, but the water meter readings, if they've not been read at the time, we're now looking back in time trying to guess where the water, how much usage was at that point in time. So it's wouldn't impact that much on the footprint the water uses anyway, so you can probably get a fairly good idea of what we have over that year. It's just, and I think I've alluded to before, the member working group, it's how useful that would be. So I could confidently predict to you that our carbon footprint for last year was a lot lower than the baseline year because most things were shut. So, you know, I can do a lot of work for you, come back with that carbon footprint, but the reality is all you'll go is, well, thank you very much, you've told us what we knew already, that the leisure centres were closed and the offices were closed. So I'm not sure it would really achieve. I'd rather take a proper working year. So as we move into this year, I would suggest that this year, comparing that to the 2018 year, will give us a better direction of travel. Whereas the years in between, because we know it's been exceptional circumstances, I just don't think they'll really provide you with any value.
Okay, thank you. The next point is on page 7.6, and it's the third row, and what it's saying is that we're awaiting transfer of assets under the ADP. Is there a reason for waiting for that before we fix the automated meters?
I mean, purely cost, you know, so it's just a question of that, you know, I guess we're expecting the asset development programme to move forward fairly soon now. So the idea of putting meters into buildings that really won't contribute to our footprint in the future might seem a bit nonsensical. I don't think that costs very much. It's something I am revisiting, so we're getting some information as we go along at the moment, so it may be something we revisit with assets.
Okay, thanks. The next question is relating to bullet point 4, which was the setting the CO2 reduction targets. And we've got, in page 7.1 of the report, we've got the baseline year of 2018-19, and that reported 1,777 tonnes of CO2 produced across the council activities. Could that be used as a baseline?
I must confess, I know you've already asked me this question, and I've puzzled myself with what I've actually put in the response. So the answer is yes, I think we already have a baseline. Yeah. So it's more about the need for a meaningful non-COVID year. So I think the first part there can probably be removed. Need to establish a baseline first is actually inaccuracy, so I apologise for that. I think that could be actually removed from the report. But the need to a meaningful non-COVID year is referring to what I've already said about, you know, I could get you some data, but I think it's just not worth comparing at this time.
Yeah.
So I apologise for that.
Okay. On page 7.8, the first bullet point about car sharing, it says there's no progress on that. But is that actually the case? I know we're coming out of COVID, but is that still the case?
It's still the case at present. I think that's something we'll start looking at now that we are out of COVID. But I think while we're unsure about how COVID policies are going to be applied, then I guess having car sharing sort of policies and practices just didn't seem applicable.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. And then finally, on the same page, on page 7.8, bullet points 2 and 3, can there be a target date set for the delivery of the literacy course for staff?
I mean, I think I said we said 2022 is a bit broad, isn't it? But so if I said, I mean, we're looking at this right at this moment, so it's one of the priorities to get underway. I would say by the end of Q2, which is, I guess, October, isn't it? Yeah. So I would be very surprised if by October we don't have that training in place for senior management.
Okay. Thank you. Any other points, members? Before we go to the vote, members, I'd like to read out a statement that the Vice Chair's asked me to read, but unfortunately she can't be here. So this is verbatim, so I'm not going to do it in her voice. It's just... No. I'm sorry I cannot attend tonight as I'm COVID positive. I've asked our chairman to kindly read this out on my behalf. I would first like to thank Marcus Houghton for all his hard work. Marcus, as you are also the officer responsible for leading on the waste contract renewal, probably the most important contract our council has, and overseeing the recent Bloor Homes appeal, I hope that members did not give you too hard a time tonight. I know that given your hard work, having you hard work enough over this period of time to push forward our carbon neutral plans. I would like to say thank you to the following members who have contributed to the Carbon Neutral Working Group this municipal year. They are Councillor Arthur Williams, Councillor Mike Wilkinson, Councillor Mrs Laureen Shaw, Councillor Stuart Wilson, Councillor Craig Cannell and Councillor Mrs Julie Gooding. The Carbon Neutral Working Group has not progressed with the targets as much as I would have liked, but with thanks to Councillor Sperring and Councillor Wootton, the investment recommended into this project has been given, and officers confirm that they are confident that our targets can be reached. The latest IPCC report, released only this week, urges a now or never effort to make sure our environment remains livable. I doubt there is any member that does not appreciate the need for our council to expedite our plans, but it is only by working together that we can make this happen. By working together, we can contribute our collective ideas. By working together, we can drive this forward to success, as failure is not an option. So that was from Joe. Thank you. So Members, we've got 5 recommendations set out at paragraph 11.1 on page 7.4 of the report, which I will move from the chair. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Dray. So that progress be noted on the carbon neutral action plan, brackets appendix 1, close bracket. Is that noted, members? Thank you. That the change in the terms of reference for the carbon neutral working group be noted. Is that noted? Thank you. That it be recommended to executive that a formal service level agreement is drawn up to secure continued access to the Climate and Sustainability Officer. Can those members in favour please raise their hands? Okay, thank you, members. That is unanimous. Sorry. For that, the proposed public consultation on the draft sustainability strategy be noted. Is that noted, members? Thank you. And that it be noted that a further paper outlining the proposed finalised sustainability strategy will be presented for consideration by the review committee in the autumn. Is that noted, members? Okay, thank you, members. Members, move on to item 8 on the agenda, which is the key decisions document, which is obviously getting a lot lighter. Are there any questions on the key decision document? Okay, there are none. Thank you. Item 9, the work plan. Members, are there any questions on the work plan? Councillor Dray?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry.
Fluid.
One thing that I'd like to see included in there is the flood forum, a review of the criteria stroke terms of reference for the flood forum, if that can be included.
Yep. Are members happy for that to be added? Okay, thank you. If you can put that into the next municipal year. Thank you. Before I close the meeting, I'd just like to say a few words. I'd like to thank all members of the committee and the officers for their support during this, what I've always called a transition year, where we've been making big changes. And I'm really conscious that in moving to the new ways of working, that the amount of time required by members of this committee has probably doubled. It's gone up a lot more than before. But I believe it's bearing fruit now, where we're having the pre-meetings. In effect, we're having 2 meetings, but it is bearing fruit because I think a number of things, for example, tonight, Councillor James Gooding was able to pick up some of the questions that an absent member was going to ask. So I think it gives us that resilience. It's not within my gift to organise the committee for the next municipal year, and it would be very presumptuous of me to think that that would be so. But I would like to hope that those of you that have been members of the committee, that if you've enjoyed it, you would like to continue on it and help bring on other members as well. One thing that I've asked officers to consider early training for the future committee in the next municipal year, because I think we, and it might not be me, but whoever is here needs to hit the ground running. I think one of the lessons that we learned is having training early on before we got started was really, really useful. And finally, I would like to wish all those members who are standing for re-election good luck, and hopefully we'll see you on the other side. So members, I'll now formally close the meeting at 20:05. Thank you, members.
Chair.
Thank you.
Chair, can I make a statement, please, just quickly? I'd just like to say you've been an excellent chair. It's been a pleasure working with you.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been a pleasure working with you. It makes it easy. If you've got a group of people, leading a team is easy. So thank you all very much. Thank you.